Good day, my name is Sky, and I appreciate you spending some study time with me. I'm here to help you make money in online poker by teaching you key strategies and getting you to take action. To help you take notes with the strategy I discussed today, and to watch the exclusive video that can only be found on the show notes page, well, go right there to the show notes page, smartpokerstudy.com/pod506. Let's get into it. Gambate!
We win, and they get the chicks. That sucks, dude. That's what I'm telling you, it's jobs. We gotta get jobs. Then we get the khakis. Then we get the chicks. Starting tomorrow, we gotta stop playing games.
In my prior podcast, episode number 505, and you can listen to that by going to the show notes page, smartpokerstudy.com/pod505. I gave you a challenge to teach yourself to overbet bluff on the flop. Did you do it? Did you play 3 sessions? Did you set a goal on day 1, day 2, and day 3 to get higher numbers each time? Well, I did, and my results, they're not conclusive yet. And then so this is kind of an interesting podcast. I had intended to do a full-on podcast plus video about how to overbet bluff the flop. But I feel like I've only just barely scratched the surface, right? It's a play I hardly ever made in the past. When I was focusing on it over 3 sessions, I only made it 16 times. And actually, some were for value and some were as bluffs. Some were on the turn instead of the flop as well. So I definitely need to spend more time focusing on it. So this is kind of like an interim, how's it going with overbet bluffing on the flop. So right here in Poker Tracker 4, you can see my results. 16 hands where I did this, $6 up, positive 759 big blinds per 100 hands, or positive 121 big blinds total that I've won with the overbetting play. Now let me whip out this Excel spreadsheet. I broke it down. You can see we have 16 hands across those 4 positions, button, MP, big blind, and small blind. With each of the hands, what I held, the street that I made my overbet on, was it a bluff or a value bet? Was it successful or not? Now, altogether, flop overbet bluffs, I made 9 of them in total, and 7 out of the 9 were successful. They got the opponent to fold. So I won 61 big blinds with 78% success. So just in this small sample, it does show that overbetting, it puts a ton of pressure on your opponents, and they're more likely than not going to fold. But like I said, small sample, right? I'm going to do a ton more of this before I actually come out with the full-on how to overbet bluff on the flop video. Now, as I was playing, I came across some instances, especially when I was out of position, where I didn't overbet bluff the flop, but because my opponent showed weakness on the flop by making maybe a small bet or checking after I checked, boom, I came out and fired an overbet on the turn. The 4 times I did that, they were all successful. They were all bluffs as well. 100% success right there. Won just a few big blinds from that. We'll take a look at a couple of those hands. When it came to value overbetting, there was a couple instances where I had a good hand like an overpair, and I overbet, but maybe I didn't get value when I did overbet. So this was just 3 times where I overbet, not necessarily a bluff. So it's kind of like outside the scope of the bluff overbetting stuff we're talking about. But here, when it comes to the bluffing, 9 times, right? I answered the question, what makes a great flop overbet bluff opportunity? Now, I'm telling you right now, if you're watching the video or listening to the podcast, this is not a finalized answer to this question. In a few weeks after maybe I've made, like you saw, I made 16 overbets, 13 were bluffs. I want to make like a good 37 more. I want to get to 50 overbet bluffs. I want to do a lot more studying, maybe even run some stuff through a GTO software to really see, to really test out, to really understand this strategy before I come out with a full-on video. But one of the things, what makes a great flop overbet bluff opportunity is being in position, that positional advantage. Your opponents know you're overbetting the flop right now. Holy cow, if I call, what's he going to do on the turn? He might overbet bluff again. It probably gives you a little bit higher likelihood that he's going to fold on the flop. Let's take a look at a hand like this on the button with pocket deuces. Pop this open. I got pocket deuces on the button. Now, I did this full test in Ignition, and purposefully in Ignition because 24 hours later, you can download the whole card exposed hands. So we can see exactly what they folded, when they folded versus my overbet. It's so much better to test overbets and analyze strategy like this when you can actually see the hands that your opponents did fold. Now, 22/6 player open raises to 2.6. We decide to call because we have the best position. The 2 blinds fold, so we're in position as a preflop caller with pocket deuces. The flop comes down ace, jack, ace. This 22/6 player, you can see he doesn't open raise often. He checks to me. That tells me he doesn't have an ace. He would at least bet something small right here on the ace, jack, ace. He's a tight player. He's coming out firing at least 1 or 2 big blinds just to start building that pot with trip aces. Or even pocket jacks for a full house. He would probably bet as well. So I sensed weakness. I'm in position. I made it 8.2 over the 6.6 big blind pot, and he folded right there. So we could see 7-8 of hearts. He had a backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw. That's it. 2 undercards. Really easy to get him to fold. A smaller bet could have worked right here, but oftentimes when it comes to making smaller bets, your opponents, maybe not this particular kind of player, but we have another player at the table, a 31-24, even a tight aggressive player, 13-9. They see boards, paired boards like this, ace, ace, jack, and they realize, whoa, this guy could easily be bluffing. Let me call. Let me stick around one more street. Let me see what he does on the turn. When you make it big like this, you're in position. You're more likely to earn the pot. Now, the second point, what makes a great flop overbet bluff opportunity? I typed out target a player whose range doesn't interact well with the boards. Now, an example of this, in the big blind, king jack offsuit. Let's pop that hand open. In the small blind, this player, 100 big blind stack. I have 100 big blinds as well. He opens with ace 6 suited out of the small blind. I decide to 3-bet to 9 big blinds with king jack offsuit. He's an unknown. I only have one hand on him. I was just trying to take this pot down. There's a good chance he would fold, but he called me. Okay, pot on the flop is 18 big blinds, 10, 8, 4. Now, when players call 3-bets, they often call with 2 broadways. King, queen suited, ace, queen suited, ace, jack suited. This board, 10, 8, 4, only has 1 Broadway. His 3-bet calling range does not interact well. So he checks, and I come out firing 21.2. Boom. He folds. And the reason why I made this play, well, 2 things. I'm in position as the preflop 3-better. What would I make it if I had pocket aces right here? I might come in for this amount, try to extract max value out of this player. That range just doesn't interact well with the single Broadway board. And what kind of 10s does he have in his range? Ace 10, maybe king 10 suited. That's about it right here. 10 jack suited might make this kind of pre-flop call, but I was taking a chance, right? You're always taking a chance when you're bluffing, especially with overbet bluffing because you're risking so many chips. But this one ended up working out and he folded. Another example, targeting a player whose range doesn't interact well with the board. On the button, ace 5 offsuit. So we have ace 5 offsuit. We open raise to 2. We get a fold out of the small blind. And now the big blind, a 7/4 player, very tight, decides to call with pocket 9s, we can see. Now here's the problem. 9, 8, queen. Tight players are so happy defending out of the big blind with suited connectors. Anything from king, queen suited down to 6, 7, they hit something on the queen 9, 8. We got pairs, we got 2 pairs, we got pair plus draw, we got a flop straight with 10 jack, we have 9, 8, 2 pair, queen jack, pair plus gut shot. So much stuff on the queen 9, 8. It is a small pot, so I don't really mind this overbet. I tried 5.8 into the 4.4. This is a time when his range, it did interact well, so I was going against this idea. But I was practicing the overbets, right? You got to make it when you get the chance to. And he called me. Okay, the 3 of spades comes on the turn, making the board queen 9, 8, 3 with 2 spades. He checks. And my original thought, when you make an overbet, you make it because you expect them to fold. Their call means they have something on the board. And on the queen 9, 8 flop, he has something I highly doubt he would fold to a barrel on a blank 3 of spades right here. So I check behind. The river comes a deuce, putting 3 spades out there. Queen 9, 8, 3 deuce. But he bets 2/3 pot, 10 into 16. So I just fold. But I went against this idea and it was an unsuccessful flop bluff. Now, you want to target good flops. You're looking for dry flops. They're best because they have less solid draws to continue with. If it's a rainbow board, if there's no open-enders possible, probably better boards. Also, paired flops and maybe even super wet, scary flops like queen jack 9 with 2 hearts. Those could get a random 9. A random underpair, just a jack, could possibly fold on a board that is so wet. Even if it was maybe 3 hearts, a monotone board might be pretty good. I didn't have any of those opportunities to really bluff at super wet, scary boards, but I'll be trying them in the coming days. But in the MP, let's take a look at this king jack suited hand. Now it's a paired board. I open raise with king jack out of the MP. We get 3 folds. The big blind decides to call with jack 10 suited. The flop comes down ace, ace, 8. Paired aces on the board with the 8. No flush draw possible. No straight draw possible either. He checks 6.4 big blinds in the pot. I bet 8 big blinds even on the ace, ace, 8, and he made a quick fold. That's just one of those scary boards that are lovely to target. Out of the MP, another good flop holding ace, king offsuit. We open raise with ace king out of the MP. 2 folds, small blind calls, big blind folds. We're heads up in position with ace king versus his ace 9 of hearts. Flop comes down jack 6 deuce. So obviously jack 6 deuce, there's no open enders. Rainbow, jack 6 deuce. No open enders, no flushes possible. 1 big card, just the jack. There's a good chance he missed this. 7 big blind pot. He checks. I bet 8.4. Boom. He folds. Loving that. Now, he might have folded versus 5 big blinds, but he's a 33/24 player, loose aggressive, who has not folded to a C-bet just yet. He might have called just to stick around and see the next street. Now, if he had called, we're ahead of him with our ace king versus our ace 9. But what if he calls our 5 big blinds and then he hits a 9 on the turn, or even like a queen comes and he decides to donk bet 2/3 pot? We just end up folding. I like this overbet right here. Now, you want to target players who can find a fold. Generally, tight aggressive and loose aggressive, not calling stations. Let's take a look at that MP ace king offsuit again. So on this table, we have that 33/24 player. He's so loose and so aggressive, he is going to read into our overbet that we have strength. Most likely, he will at least. So he was a good one to target with my ace-king bluff on the flop. We have a 57/57. Don't know much about him, but he is aggressive. He's going to want to be the one to apply aggression towards you. He's going to hate facing aggression on his own. Probably more likely to fold. And then 11/6 over here, kind of a nitty type player. Yeah, he would be able to fold as well when I overbet that flop 8.4 into 7. That was a 120% pot, 1.2x pot. Next point, hold drawing equity and backup equity. Just in case they call, you want lots of turn equity outs to improve your hand. We have a really good example that I'll show you right now. Let's take a look at this ace queen of diamonds hand, and you could see this in action. So I'm in the big blind. Pocket 4s decides to limp. Cutoff folds. Button makes it 4 big blinds with jack 9 offsuit. Remember, at the time, I didn't know he had jack 9 offsuit, right? But he ISO raised to 4. I suspected weakness. He's a 40/21 player. Yeah, he's got a really wide range. So I stuck it to him. I made it 16 big blinds with my ace queen suited. The pocket 4s decided to fold. But then the button player, 40/21 with jack 9 off, decides to call. That feels to me like he's throwing away 12 big blinds right there by calling. But my guess is he was calling with the plan of as soon as I check flop, he is going to come out firing, maybe going all in, put max pressure on me. My guess is that was his plan. Flop comes down king 9-10 with 2 diamonds. I have ace queen of diamonds. It's 1 overcard plus a flush draw plus a gut shot. A lot of good things that can happen. And then plus, if he just has some kind of like weak pair or a random ace X hand, he can't hold a nut flush draw with an ace, right? It could be like ace 5 of hearts, and he's just going to fold. I bet 38 into 33, and he calls. Now, if we look at his call, 38 big blinds, he has jack 9, he has a 3rd pair plus a gut shot on a flush draw board. Super weak call. I only have 59 big blinds behind. He only has 100 big blinds behind. He's not thinking. All he's doing is looking at his hand and calling just based on hand strength. Super fish, and that's why I said earlier, target players who can find a fold, not calling stations. And I think this guy's probably a calling station, especially after he committed so many chips versus a 3-bet pre-flop. The turn comes a 6 of diamonds, giving me the nut flush now, right? So I come out firing 59 into 109. I was hoping he just had a king that could not fold on that 3rd diamond. It's a bummer. He ended up folding, but this is one of the reasons why when you overbet, it's a really good idea to have so much drawing equity, flush draw, gut shot, 1 overcard as well with the ace. 2 overcards would have been great if that board would have been a little different than the king 10-9. But yeah, that's why we make these plays, because now we can go for max value. I was only 59 into 109. I'm really surprised he folded. If that wouldn't have been a diamond, a 6 of spades, I bet he would have called my shove. Now, the last thing, When you're out of position, all of these bluffs that you saw me making in these demonstration hands, everything was in position. But when you're out of position, check. And if he checks back, overbet on the turn. Assuming everything else is kind of in place, his range doesn't interact well, you read weakness in his check behind, right? His flop check back equals weak pairs and draws, maybe just non-made ace high, king high kind of hands. Fire on that turn. In the small blind, we have ace deuce suited right here. So obviously, small blind, I'm out of position. 4 players dealt in, but I open raise in the small blind with ace deuce of hearts, and now a 10 jack of clubs decides to call. So I'm the pre-flop raiser, but I'm out of position. Heads up, the flop comes down king 5 jack with 2 spades. I have a backdoor flush, backdoor straight, overcard ace, not much going on right now. So I check, totally showing weakness. But what does he do? He decides to bet just 2 big blinds. And I'm thinking to myself, well, this could easily be weakness. I am going to call. Let's see what he does on the turn. Just like the other player did when he called with just a jack 9, I just have some backdoor stuff in one overcard, but it's such a small bet. He's a 33-23. Let's call and see what he does. He just took a little stab for 2 big blinds right here. The 5 of spades came. Now there's 3 to the flush plus a paired board. King, jack, 5-5 with 3 spades. All I have is an ace deuce of hearts, no flush or anything. But I take this opportunity, boom, fire 10, because you could imagine I would have check called with most of my flush draws. Even a king could have check called. Now I decide to bet out right here, and then boom, he ends up folding. He folded his second pair hand, but it was a 3 to the flush and a paired board. Pretty scary for a second pair, especially facing 10 into an 8 big blind pot. Boom, that one worked. Let me show you one more turn probing hand right here. I have ace deuce off. The button limps with 9 deuce offsuit. Small blind limps as well. I just check with an ace deuce off out of the big blind. Limped pot, king 6-6. Small blind checks, I check as well, and then the button check. Now they both showed weakness. The turn comes another king, so king 6-6, very scary board. The small blind checks, I suspect nothing right here. This is where he could have fired, or should have fired, one big blind to try to build the pot if he had a king or a 6, just to try to win a few more chips. So I come out firing. I make it 5.2 into 3, sending the message that I've got the goods. I missed out on value on the flop, like I wanted him to bet or something, the button to bet. He didn't, and they folded, and I took this one down. One other turn over betting hand, king deuce offsuit here. So we get a limper, and I have king deuce off in the big blind. So I check. We're heads up. I'm out of position. Ace 10-7. Now, one of the key things, if you are going to plan on overbetting the turn, I recommend to time down before you check on the flop. Make him think that you're thinking about the best way to get value. So we check, and then he's only got 4-5 on the ace 10-7. He checks behind as well. I sense super weakness right here. Another 7 comes on the turn. Let's take a stab at it. Let's make it 3.6, 1.5 times the 2.4 big blind pot, and then boom, he folds and we take it down. All right, now it's time for a little action step for you. On the screen right now, we've got my overbet bluffing on the flop, the answer to what makes a great flop overbet bluff. Write these things down on a piece of paper, play your next few sessions, and look for any hands with all of this in play. When that's the case, make your overbet. Test it out along with me. Like I said, with that Excel spreadsheet, I made 9 overbet bluffs on the flop. I would love to make 41 more. I'm going to strive for 50 overbet bluffs on the flop. I'm going to reanalyze everything, maybe run some of this through GTO, a GTO software, and then really figure out this strategy. And then I'll come back and present a full-on how to overbet bluff on the flop video. And it might actually just go to my Poker Forge members instead of YouTube. We'll see. Not exactly sure how I'm going to do that just yet. But anyway, the ball is in your court. Please take action. Play at least a few sessions with an overbet bluffing on the flop. Focus, and let's see how well you do. I'm at 78%. Let's see if you can do better. All right. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.